Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskatyade Siddharne. Today I'm going to read from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, Chapter 5, which is entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, text number 7. Yoga yukta vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriya sarabhutatma bhutatma korvanapni nalipyate. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Purport. One who is on the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness is very dear to every living being. Every living being is dear to him. This is due to his Krishna consciousness. Such a person cannot think of any living being as separate from Krishna, just as the leaves and branches of a tree are not separate from the tree. He knows very well that by pouring water on the root of the tree, the water will be distributed to all the leaves and branches. Or by supplying food to the stomach, the energy is automatically distributed throughout the body. Because one who works in Krishna consciousness is servant to all, he is very dear to everyone. And because everyone is satisfied by his work, he is pure in consciousness. Because he is pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Because his mind is always fixed on Krishna, there's no chance of his being deviated from Krishna. Nor is there a chance that he will engage his senses in matters other than the service of the Lord. He does not like to hear anything except topics relating to Krishna. He does not like to eat anything which is not offered to Krishna. And he does not wish to go anywhere if Krishna is not involved. Therefore, his senses are controlled. A man who controls senses cannot be offensive to anyone. One may ask, why then was Arjuna offensive in battle to others? Wasn't he in Krishna consciousness? Arjuna was only superficially offensive because, as already been explained in the second chapter, all the assembled persons on the battlefield will continue to live individually, as the soul cannot be slain. So spiritually, no one was killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Only their dresses were changed by the order of Krishna, who is personally present. Therefore, Arjuna, while fighting on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, was not really fighting at all. He was simply carrying out the orders of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. Such a person is never entangled in the reactions of work. So the text again. Yoga yukta vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriya sarabhutatma bhutatma korvanapni nalipyate. One who works in devotion is a pure soul, who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Omagyanatvanandasya gananjana salakaya chaksur undulitam yena tasmai shri guruve namaha. So if you can, please put on your video. I was also asked to explain a little bit about the difference between communication and association. That in spiritual life, the association with Krishna, as explains here in this verse also, means that the soul is actually being enlightened and enlivened by Krishna's association. from the material concept of life, what's pleasant to the senses is the most important. What's pleasant to the soul is neglected because people are not aware of the fact that they're the consciousness, they're the person or the soul who creates who has the consciousness that pervades the body. Therefore, they think that the situation of the body is the most important thing because then their consciousness, what they're aware of, is most pleasant. And they avoid situations where they put their body in a situation where when they experience their body, they'll be unpleasant. But actually, the body is always unpleasant. It's only to different degrees. Sometimes it's apparently more pleasant than others. Prabhupada gives the example that during the winter, it is very unpleasant to take a cold shower. But during the summer, it's very pleasant to take a cold shower. Now, the cold shower is the same, but due to sense perception, then one thinks one is pleasant and the other is unpleasant. Similarly, in the winter, to cook in the kitchen is quite pleasant, but to cook in the kitchen during the summer can be very unpleasant. Same cooking is going on, but sometimes it appears to the soul to be pleasant or unpleasant. This is due to one's association with the illusory energy that causes one to be more concentrated on the body and the senses than anything else. In other words, just like I explained before, Hiranyakashipu, after his brother was killed, Hiranyaksha, he was searching over the universe to find the killer of his brother, Lord Varaha. So Lord Varaha understood that I'm not the incarnation that's supposed to kill Hiranyakashipu. Instead, my other incarnation will come and kill him. But if I get into a fight with Hiranyakashipu, what am I supposed to do? Therefore, he decided that he has to hide from Hiranyakashipu. But he also decided that since I'm half the size of the universe, it's going to be quite hard for him not to find me. So he made himself very small and then entered into Hiranyakashipu's heart through his nostril, just like he came out from Lord Brahma's nostril. So he entered Hiranyakashipu's heart through his nostril, because he knew that Hiranyakashipu would never look inside himself to think about anything. He was only interested in what's external. So similarly, when we have no consciousness or Krishna consciousness, when we only understand and see things externally, then that's our whole experience. But there's a possibility of another experience, that is, at first we hear about Krishna. So that hearing about Krishna, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Gyanena tu tad agyanam yesham nashitam atmanaha tesham adityavad jnanam prakashiti tatparam. When, however, one is enlightened with a knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, just like the sun lights up everything in the daytime. For instance, in the winter, in the morning before the sun comes up, everything is dark. But even when the sun slightly comes up, then we can see that the sun's there. It may not illuminate the sky, it may not illuminate our surroundings, but we can perceive the sun. There's some light there, little light in the sky, a little light in our surroundings. Similarly, in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, Krishna had said to Arjuna, touch Shinu, hear from me. And in the next verse, Krishna said, Tadbuddhiyas, that woman's intelligence. So what is intelligence? Intelligence externally, when utilized externally, can do so many things in the material world, just like they're using intelligence nowadays to create artificial intelligence. So we can take the things in the material world and organize them in such a way by artificial intelligence that would take most people many hours to do. They can do in a few seconds by artificial intelligence. But it has nothing to do, generally speaking, in itself with any kind of spiritual advancement, any spiritual intelligence. It's just organizing earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego in a faster way, that's all. Sometimes it's better the way they organize it, and sometimes it's not so good. In any case, it's just a different type of utilization of intelligence to organize the material world more quickly. Often, as Krishna said, because it's lacking spiritual intelligence, he said in the Bhagavad Gita, Etam drishtim avashtavya nashtatmano na buddhaya pravat yugra karmana shaye jagato hita. Without Krishna consciousness, without directing our intelligence to finding out about ourselves as Brahman, or taking shelter of Paramatma as our guide, and guiding us towards our relationship with the Supreme Person, Krishna, who is the ultimate object of all love and affection, happiness and illumination. Such use of artificial intelligence, generally speaking, degrades the human being. I saw on the internet a little cartoon, not a cartoon, it was a video, it was a play. One man walks into a store and he's looking at his smartphone and asking artificial intelligence, what should he say? And the artificial intelligence says, say hello. So he says hello. And then the man on the counter checks his smartphone to find out how he should reply. And the artificial intelligence tells him to say hello also. So he says hello. And then the man who came into the store as a customer checks his phone, and artificial intelligence says, do you have such and such item? And the man under the counter checks his smartphone and says, yes, we have it. And this way the conversation goes on between two smartphones, between two foolish people. So such a use of intelligence, artificial intelligence, actually degrades human society. Although people are thinking that the computers are getting smarter, but they're becoming more stupid. So is the aim of life to create a smart computer or to create a smart human being? That we have to choose. So smart human being begins with understanding, as it says in this purport, that we're all eternal, that we're Brahman. Or as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Prakashayat yat evam kritsnam lokimam ravi kshetra kshetraga samyoga tadvidi bharatarshava. That when just like the sun is in the sky and illuminates the entire sky with sunlight, so the soul within the body is situated in one part of the body and illuminates the entire body with consciousness. So do we want to make ourselves more conscious, or do we want to use our intelligence to make the body more comfortable so that we can experience it in a more comfortable way temporarily. Of course, a certain amount of maintenance has to be for the body. It's not that we want to neglect it. Unless one is an avadhuta, or completely self-realized, and is completely tolerant of any material circumstance, and therefore, because one is internally concentrated, therefore one is able to not be affected by his external environment or by the situation of his body. But most of us are not on that platform as of yet. So therefore, if we neglect the body in our process of trying to become here, first of all, trying to learn how to hear, because learning how to hear is the basic principle of accepting within our ears the transcendental sound vibration and allowing it to stay there within our minds. So that requires a good deal of intelligence to just do that. So that intelligence is what we're supposed to learn, is how to hear and accept the transcendental intelligence. Now, the challenge, of course, is that we don't have a taste for hearing transcendental knowledge. We've already developed a taste for hearing about how to make the body comfortable and avoid distress. Of course, modern society, they're emphasizing distress and their fear, making everyone afraid that something's going to happen to their body. And therefore they have to surrender to Big Brother, or else if they don't surrender to Big Brother, the bad guys will come and take over, and therefore put everyone into distress. Of course, they don't tell us that they themselves are putting us in distress by creating these imaginary scenarios where everyone is afraid all the time. But this is called the illusory energy. People are constantly reading the newspapers, hearing television or the news on the internet, something that happens in 10,000 miles away, 10,000 kilometers away, has nothing to do with them directly, but people are afraid that this is going to affect me sometime in the future, and therefore my only shelter is to take shelter of Big Brother. Or nowadays it might be Big Sister also. But actually the soul is illuminating the body with consciousness, and it has the capacity of accepting spiritual consciousness through its ears, through hearing the process, of specifically understanding how to take shelter of Paramatma and his external representations as gurus, sadhu, and shastra, in order to realize both Bhagavan, Krishna, and if we realize Bhagavan, Krishna, then simultaneously we become aware of ourselves and everything else in relation to him. We become aware that everything is Brahman, including ourselves. And therefore, there's no more fear and anxiety. So if there's no fear and anxiety, then at least we become prasannatma. We become joyful. And from that platform, we can begin to actually steadily concentrate our minds upon Krishna. Because Vishaya vinivartante nirharasidehinam rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishva nivartate. That the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains, but ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, one becomes fixed in consciousness. So under the present educational system, beginning from our parents, generally speaking, to our schooling, to our present means of communication, everything is geared around making the body safe and comfortable. But everyone knows that the body is never safe and it's never really comfortable. But still, one is encouraged to artificially or concentrate one's entire attention on making the body safe and comfortable. On the other hand, when the soul becomes enlightened in Krishna, when it becomes associated with Krishna, directly can experience Krishna, then the result is one feels safe and one feels comfortable. Otherwise, there is no safety and comfort in the material world, not only for the body, but also for the soul. Now, the body can never be safe because it's Krishna personally who's, in the form of time, taking everyone's body away from them. So God himself, Krishna himself in the form of time, is taking everyone's body, including Lord Brahma's body, who lives for 311 trillion, 40 billion years. If their bodies are being gradually annihilated by the will of Krishna, and Krishna says that he's come to engage everyone. When Arjuna asked him, "Who are you?" Arjuna saw the universal form, he saw that Krishna was quite different from his general form. Instead of having beautiful lotus eyes and a peacock feather, etc., yellow dhoti, eating only food offered to him by his devotees. Now he was a warrior on a battlefield, and he was eating non-vegetarian, namely the soldiers on the battlefield. Now Arjuna never thought that his dear Lord, his worshipful friend, his lovable friend, would actually start eating people on a battlefield. So Arjuna is quite surprised. So he asked Krishna, "Who are you?" And Krishna said, "I'm time." And time is an energy which is also eternal. At least in the material world, maybe it's not eternal in the material world, but in the spiritual world there's eternal time, where material time is absent. In any case, by material time, everything here is changing, including our bodies and everything else in the material world. So there's no question of safe, because as soon as we take birth, we have a certain number of breaths that we can take before we have to get our next body, either spiritual or material. Of course, the yogis, they stop breathing, they learn the technique, they spend their time and energy learning techniques where they can stop breathing and live for hundreds of years. But I don't think most of us are interested in that. And especially devotees aren't interested in necessarily living in hundreds of years in Kali Yuga, because Kali Yuga will not get better in 100 years from now, or 300 years from now. But we can get better, the soul can get better. Therefore, one who can understand the temporary nature of the material world and the eternal position of the soul and the Supreme Lord, then they want to hear about how to concentrate their minds so they can actually think about Krishna, become aware of him with our spiritual senses. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, that yatro paramate chitam niruddha yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam pashanatmani tushati sukhama yanti kanya tad buddhigrahim atindriyam vediyatra nachayvayam siddham chalati tatvataha yam lava chapalam lavam manyate nadikam tata, yasmin sito nadukena, guruna pi vichalyate, tam vidya dukasam yogam, viyogam yoga samgitaha. That state of trance is called samadhi, when one's mind is completely fixed on, by virtue of completely fixed on Krishna. That is manifested by one's ability to concentrate his mind upon the pure self, the soul, Krishna, and rejoice in that self. In such a state, one is experiencing boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through spiritual senses. So we have spiritual senses. Those spiritual senses are now being misdirected towards trying to experience material things. Enjoys himself through spiritual. In that state, he thinks that there's no greater gain. And being situated in such a state, one thinks he no longer experiences material miseries. This is possible by the practice of Krishna consciousness. So even in the yoga system, the idea is to concentrate the mind upon what one has heard is the form of Krishna. Now when we hear something about Krishna, because Krishna is absolute, there's no difference between hearing about Krishna and Krishna manifesting himself in that form. As a matter of fact, hearing about Krishna from a devotee means that Krishna is manifesting himself in that form. The devotee describes himself according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So if one hears how Krishna has the yellow dhoti, he has a peacock feather, he has blooming eyes like lotus petals, he has a flute, etc., and one imagines that, then one is, imagine doesn't mean that one is concocting. Material imagination means that one is creating something which is not necessarily real within one's mind. Matter of fact, the whole material world for the conditioned soul is an imagination. Either dreaming, when we're dreaming, we're just imaging things, what we've seen in the material world when we're awake. And when we wake, we're imaging things according to the modes that we're looking through. The image is there, but it's not what's actually there. Just like if one walks down the street and sees a rope and thinks it's a snake, there's something there, but it's not a snake. Or one may see a rope, one may see a snake and think it's a rope. The snake is there, but it's not a rope. Similarly, the material world is temporary, but it's Krishna's energy working under his direction. Therefore, in that sense, it's real, but we don't see it as it is. We only see partially. If we see a man and a woman, it's not that we're seeing incorrectly, because nowadays it's sometimes difficult to figure out who's a man and who's a woman. But it's not that we're not seeing correctly, that this is a man or a woman, we're just seeing partially. Probably gives the example that when he was younger, he'd see the train go by, and he'd wonder where the horses were. Because his experience as a boy was that all the cars, all the vehicles were all with a horse and buggy. So he couldn't, when the train went by, he couldn't see the horses. He was wondering where they were. Because he couldn't imagine the train could be driven by anything else other than horses. Or Prabhupada said that the car is driving down the street and someone says, there goes the president. So a less intelligent person may think the car is the president because he doesn't see the president within the car. So similarly, when one sees anything in the material world, man, woman, or animal, and he doesn't see that there's a soul within the body, along with the driver, the super soul, then he's only seeing partially, externally. He doesn't see the actual, he's misidentifying the car as the vehicle working without a driver. Of course, nowadays they have these driverless cars, but they're also being driven by some program that someone made up. They just don't start driving by themselves. They're being directed by some kind of intelligence. Maybe not directly in the car, but by some remote intelligence is directing it. So, unless we understand the value of hearing, so we can put Krishna within our heart, then we can't really discover who we actually are, who everyone else is, and really what's going on here in terms of what karma is, what time is, what the material nature is, who we are, who Krishna is. Unless we hear about Krishna and understand what is our relationship with Krishna, to act in such a way is that we can associate with Krishna by experience, by putting our consciousness upon Krishna with the proper attitude, the attitude of love, or appreciation, or service. Now, Kamsa, he also constantly put his consciousness upon Krishna. Therefore, he was, in one sense, more advanced than we are in concentrating his mind upon Krishna. But it was out of fear. He was afraid that Krishna was going to kill him. He didn't realize that Krishna was already killing him at every moment, but he was afraid that he might even die in the future. He had heard rumors that sometimes people die in his kingdoms, so he was afraid that he might also die sometime. But actually, his body was already dead, because it's just an imagination to think that our body's alive and forget about the soul within the body. But Kamsa had no deeper knowledge. He may have understood that he's not the body, but because he was not actually aware of the fact that the Paramatma was giving him that knowledge that he's not the body, which should be evident to anyone with any intelligence. So one who goes through some kind of austerity, who doesn't give up his intelligence to the illusory energy so easily, can understand quite easily that he's not the body. But to understand that we're directed by Paramatma, that's a little bit more advanced. That we're not individually or collectively the source of real intelligence. It's Paramatma within our heart who's supplying us real intelligence. So we can realize that we're not the body, but more than that, we can realize our relation with Krishna, which includes that we're not the body and that we're everything, and everything is related to Krishna. As it says here, Yata tura mula nishechanena triptyanti tatskanda bujo pashaka prahana rachaya tendriyanam tataiva sarvahama atateja. Just like if we water the root of a tree, the water naturally goes to all the leaves and branches. Or if we supply food to the stomach, then naturally all the different parts of the body are served. Similarly, if we serve the Supreme Lord, then everyone, including the demigods, will be satisfied. Now, as it says here, does that mean that Arjuna was killing people on the battlefield Kurukshetra and they were sending him gifts of flowers to his descendants, the people who survived? My dear Arjuna, you're so kind. You've killed my brother. You killed my father. You killed my son. So here's a gift for you. That everyone was satisfied in that way. No, they were not necessarily satisfied. And that if you kill someone on the battlefield, even if you're Arjuna and you're doing it on behalf of Krishna, people will not send you notes of gratitude. My dear Arjuna, you're so kind. You cut off both my hands and my legs on the battlefield. I want to thank you very much. You're very kind. No, actually, they probably didn't appreciate it, some of the warriors. As a matter of fact, they were trying to kill Arjuna too, if not trying to kill Krishna. But that doesn't mean that they didn't benefit. If we look at the material world in terms of what our minds and our intelligence and our false ego and our senses are desiring, people will not appreciate anyone who's an obstacle towards fulfilling our material desires, whether sensual or mental, intellectual or egotistical. But that doesn't mean that the soul is not benefited. In other words, whatever our crazy mind comes up with, whatever our perverted intelligence thinks, whatever we're identifying with the false ego, it's not actually for the benefit of the soul. Now, if the soul gets liberated, then and goes to the heavenly planets or Brahman, then there's some appreciation that whoever did this to me is very kind. Just like a surgeon may do an operation and it may be a little painful, so the patient may complain. But afterwards, if the patient is cured, then there is appreciation for the good doctor who did the operation. I think I heard some World War, Civil War story in America. There was a civil war between the North and the South. So one man was shot by a cannonball and took away his leg. So he was going to bleed to death. So the soldiers came along and put the stump, whatever was left, into the fire to stop the bleeding. So he was complaining, he was cursing the soldier who was putting him into so much pain. Later on, he woke up after a few days and he realized he was alive. And he thanked the very soldiers who had held him down and cauterized his leg and saved him from dying. But in the immediacy of the experience, he was thinking that these people who are causing me so much pain, they're actually my enemies, and was cursing them. But later on, he realized when he understood it was for his benefit, he gave them all thanks and blessings for their good work. So similarly, if we act in Krishna consciousness, following Krishna's orders and directions, then it is not that everyone is going to shower flowers on us. But eventually, when they realize, or if they can realize, the benefit that we've given them, then they become very appreciative. Therefore, we have to understand that although there are many people seemingly working for the benefit of human society, by, for instance, there's a religious group that feeds the poor, but they feed them chicken. They're known as, in India, as the morgi. I get the word, morgi or something. What's the word for chicken in Hindi? Morgi, something like that. They're known as the Chicken Society. So they think they're benefiting the poor by giving them chickens, but actually the stomach may be temporarily filled, but the next lifetime, these poor people, they may have to take birth as a chicken. So to have our body temporarily filled up with a chicken, which means that we're going to become a chicken ourselves, is not exactly the best way of helping human society. So people don't understand that. They don't understand what the goal is. Nate vidu swartakatim hi Vishnu. They don't know that outside of Krishna consciousness, and generally speaking, especially in this age, what people think is pleasurable, whether it be a football game or I was just yesterday in Harinam and we were down in Santa Monica by the beach, and it's quite amazing to see what's actually going on there. They have so many different, they have one, we were standing in front of one store, which is an arcade, which has all these games that you can play, pinballs or whatever it is. All the lights are lighting up and all this noise. And in the background, there's people riding on a roller coaster, getting the feeling they're going to be crashed and at high speed somewhere. Other people on a Ferris wheel going up and down like a yo-yo. And this is their enjoyment. This is their happiness. This is what they live for. This opportunity to go down to this boardwalk by the beach, eat dead animals, put themselves in a sense of state of shock, try to play these video games incessantly, feeling themselves to be successful one moment and a loser the next. So this is life for the conditioned soul. And this is what they think this is our friends. They're creating this for us so that we can enjoy our lives, work hard during the week, gain some money, and throw it and spend it to ride on a roller coaster to get the sensation that we're about to be crashed into something at high speed and then survive. I mean, just like nowadays, people pay money to go on top of a building, strap themselves on a rope, and then have them pushed off the building so they get the sensation they're going to crash into the ground until finally the rope catches them and they don't kill themselves jumping off the building. It's called bungee jumping. Of course, one person, he thought, why should I spend my good money and pay for $50 or whatever it is to have someone throw me off the building? I could buy my own rope, attach it to a bridge, and jump off the bridge and get the same sensation. So he did that. Unfortunately, he didn't measure the bridge properly, and therefore the rope was the amount of rope he bought for the jump was longer than the height of the bridge. So when he jumped off the bridge, he had a very unpleasant experience on the way when he finally landed, because he did land, because the rope was too long. Any case, I'm sure he came back and was more careful the next time he jumped off a bridge. But that's not the aim of human life. The aim of human life is not to try to figure out how to enjoy this place, which is unenjoyable, rather boring, especially in Kali Yuga, but to actually find out how to experience something within ourselves which gives us a light enlightenment in our eternal nature, brings us closer to Paramatma, so that we can guide ourselves to the supreme, eternal, unlimitedly beautiful, unlimitedly kind, unlimitedly loving Krishna, full of pleasure, that we can experience even in this lifetime if we hear about Krishna, perform the activities that he desires us to perform, such as chanting Hare Krishna, and then concentrate our minds on Krishna, concentrate our minds upon the sound vibration of Hare Krishna, and try to appreciate. Of course, it says we should give our love to Krishna, but just by listening to the sound vibration of Hare Krishna, just by giving our attention to the sound vibration, we'll experience, because Krishna is, he's a source of love, and by his association, our natural love will also be awakened. That when the spark is outside the fire, it doesn't glow very much. Matter of fact, in bad environment, in the wrong environment, it may even be almost extinguished. But when it's back into the fire, then the fire adds to the glowing of the spark, and the little sparks add to the glowing of the fire. There's a reciprocation. So in the fire of Krishna consciousness, we can experience not only our nature, but our glowing nature, our original nature, which is more effulgent than 10,000 suns, each one of us. And full of bliss, like Krishna is full of bliss, and full of knowledge, full of consciousness. So that's possible when we come into association with Krishna with the proper attitude. And that begins simply by hearing. By hearing, we may not roll over the ground in ecstasy immediately because of our internal experience of Krishna consciousness, but a little bit of sunlight is there by such association of hearing about Krishna. Just like when the sun comes up, there's a little sunlight. It may not be completely illuminating, but the promise of complete illumination is there as the sun rises higher and higher. So as the Krishna sun rises more and more within our heart, then the experience of Krishna, the association with Krishna, increases our consciousness as well as the loving bliss that we have feeling towards Krishna and towards everyone. We become aware that everyone and everything is related to Krishna. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? So the important thing is I usually stress is that every day we should have some part of our day or parts of our day which are dedicated to hearing about Krishna. Try to think about what we're hearing, how it's related to ourselves practically, so that we can spend some time applying whatever we've heard within our lives. And then if we do that and practice not getting distracted by the happiness and distress that come and go, like seasonal changes, because we can't, sometimes we think, well, I chanted my rounds nicely today. I heard about Krishna. I got up early. I didn't eat too much prasadam last night. This should be a good day. And then we lose our wallet. People shout at us. We forgot to take what we wanted to take with us when we went to the store. And we think, how is this possible? I chanted my rounds nicely. I got up early. I chanted my round nicely. I read the Bhagavatam. I worship my deity. Why is Krishna doing this to me? It should be a good day. But actually, Krishna is doing it to us because he knows we've chanted our rounds nicely. We got up early. We chanted our rounds nicely. We read the Bhagavatam. We worship the deities. So our mind should be more fixed on Krishna now. So when some difficulty comes, we should be able to think of Krishna during that difficulty and not get so disturbed. And therefore, that's practice towards the actual goal of life. So when the real difficulty comes, when we have to leave this body, the real test, then we're prepared to do it. Otherwise, if we don't get any practice, if the whole life is just everything goes our way all the time, then what are we going to do when we have to leave this body? We're going to be completely distressed. I had such a nice life. Why is Krishna taking it away from me? I should have this forever. But if we have difficulty and remember Krishna, that's good practice. When finally we get the greatest difficulty, we have to give up all our attachments. And if we're prepared for that, then we get the greatest victory, the greatest success. Anything? Anyone like to say anything? Or okay, so we'll stop there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Srila
Jai.
Prabhupada Ki Jai,
Jai.
Gaur Premanande Haribol.
Haribol. Jai. Such a nice class.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.